अस्सलामुअलैकुम, आप देख रहे हैं स्पॉटलाइट का ये स्पेशल एपिसोड। नाजरीन, अजब करप्शन की गजब कहानी है। आप सोच रहे होंगे कि मैं पाकिस्तान की अंदरूनी सियासत पर बात कर रही हूँ, लेकिन मैं बात कर रही हूँ पाकिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान के दरमियान स्मगलिंग की। नाजरीन, आपको हैरत होगी कि पाकिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान के दरमियान बाहमी तजारत 1.8 बिलियन डॉलर पर मबनी है, जबकि स्मगलिंग कुछ अंदाजों के मुताबिक 3 बिलियन डॉलर के लगभग होती है। अगर सरकारी चैनल्स के जरिए तजारत हो तो आप सोचिए कि इसका फ़ायदा दोनों मुल्कों की आवाम को कितना हो सकता है। तो आप सोचिए कि इसका फ़ायदा जो होगा वो मुझे और आपको भी होगा। लेकिन पाकिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान ने आपस में तजारत और दो तरफा कारोबार के लिए मुआहदे तो साइन किए हैं, लेकिन उन पर अमल दरामद नहीं हो पाया। आज दोनों मुल्कों की आवाम की माशी खुशहाली को सियासत ने यरगमाल बना रखा है। अगर ताल्लुकात बेहतर होते हैं तो जनूबी एशिया को पाकिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान के जरिए वस्ता एशिया की मंडियों तक रसाई मिल सकती है। दोनों मुल्कों की आवाम यानी तकरीबन 241 मिलियन लोग और खित्ते के दीगर ममालिक की जिंदगियों में माशी खुशहाली आ सकती है। लेकिन ऐसा आज तक नहीं हुआ। क्यों नहीं हुआ, ये हम जानने की आज कोशिश करेंगे इस मुनफरिद शो में, जहां मैं बराह रास्त अफगानिस्तान के साथ जुड़ जाऊंगी। इससे पहले कि मैं अपने मेहमानों का यहाँ पे पाकिस्तान में तारुफ कराऊं, आइए आपको ले चलते हैं काबुल, जहां मेरे कॉलीग समी महदी हमारा इंतजार कर रहे हैं। हेलो साहमी, वी मीट येट अगेन। हु डू यू हैव दिस टाइम इन काबुल?
Assalamu alaikum Muniza, and assalamu alaikum to everybody who is watching us here in Afghanistan and Pakistan. There was a time, Muniza, when Afghanistan was solely dependent on its closest maritime neighbor, Pakistan, for trade and transport. Pakistan used to be the largest trade and import partner of Afghanistan, and Pakistani exports to Afghanistan in 2011 hit $2.4 billion. But it dropped by $1 billion by the end of 2016, while Afghanistan's exports to Pakistan during the 2015 and 16 fiscal year was around $409 million. Why this decline is happening? What are the causes? Frequent closures of the border by the Pakistani side, not delivering to the articles of APTA agreement, diversion of trade to Iran, trust deficit and insecurity are some of the factors to be blamed. But how important is bilateral trade and transit for the ordinary people of Afghanistan and Pakistan? And is there a way we can deal better? I'm Sami Mahdi, and you're watching Guftugu between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Our guests here in Kabul are Dr. Anwar al-Haq Ahadi, former Minister of Commerce, and Ms. Adila Raz, Deputy Foreign Minister of Afghanistan.
Introducing your guests there in Kabul, certainly a very prominent panel there, and we have an equally prominent panel here in Pakistan. We have the former Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Sartaj Aziz. He was recently the advisor to the Prime Minister on Foreign Affairs. He is now the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of Pakistan. He is an economist by education. And you would be surprised that he actually joined the civil service as an economist, and therefore he's very close to this idea, to this concept. And he was foreign minister in Pakistan during the Taliban regime. Right here in the studio with me, we have an economist, Haroon Sharif Saab. So thank you very much. He's the former regional advisor to the World Bank for promoting economic cooperation in South Asia. He has played a lead role in economic diplomacy when influencing policies to promote regional connectivity for trade, investment, energy, and cultural exchanges. And he's also served on many international boards as an economic advisor. So Sami, let me ask you to ask the first question, because we know that Afghanistan at the moment is a landlocked country. We provide a certain way to the rest of South Asia, and I know that you have many questions to ask us there in Kabul.
Sure, we are a landlocked country, and our closest maritime neighbor is Pakistan to access to the sea. I wanted to start the discussion on APTA. We signed the agreement in 2010, but I mean, many people here in Afghanistan have been talking about how successful this agreement has been. and why the articles of this agreement was not implemented truly. I wanted to ask this question from Mr. Sartaj Aziz there.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As far as transit trade is concerned, this facility has been available to Afghanistan for the last 70 years without any quantitative restrictions, and we have been constantly trying to improve the facilities for transit trade to Afghanistan, despite the fact that many goods were smuggled back into Pakistan, but we never interrupted the transit trade nor imposed any restrictions. Then more recently, when President Ashraf Ghani came to Pakistan in November 2014, we made special attention to the transit trade arrangements, and many buyers were agreed upon. And since then, the Transit Trade Authority between the two countries has met 6 times. The 6th meeting was held in February 2016. The last was scheduled in September, but Afghanistan cancelled the meeting. Despite the lack of interest on the part of Afghanistan, we have continued to improve our physical arrangements. The Torkham border is being modernized and upgraded. Similarly, Chaman border is being upgraded so that trucks can pass without much difficulty. As far as the reduction in trade between Pakistan and Afghanistan is concerned, that is because of the departure of a large number of US troops. About half the exports from Pakistan to Afghanistan were meant to meet the requirements of the 140,000 ISAF troops. So now that is down to 1 billion or plus, but we are still very keen to expand this trade, and that's why, as you said in your opening remarks, those which cannot move normally, they are moving through smuggled routes. We have also recently opened Kharlachi near Kuram to facilitate it. We are also going to open Ghulam Khan, which is the closest border to Bannu. So despite the tensions and the mistrust, Pakistan is trying its level best to improve the facilities, because this is something which is not meant for the government, is meant for the people of Afghanistan. So we are doing our best to make sure that people of Afghanistan are not affected adversely, and whatever goods they need can go from Pakistan as smoothly as possible.
So Sartaj Sahab, let me ask you a short question. What is the problem with on the Afghan side? Why is it that we cannot have more trade with Afghanistan? Are there problems that are on the Afghan side that is holding this back?
Well, the problem in that sense is the question of interest and facilitation. You see, because if we had had a meeting of the Afghan Transit Trade 7th meeting, which was scheduled in Kabul in September, and we also had recommended Joint Economic Committee also in September, but Afghanistan showed no interest in having these meetings. In that, any problems that traders have, any problems that importers, exporters have can be addressed. But right now, for example, I'll just give you one example. This year, Afghanistan has a bumper fruit crops. So the Giant Pakistan-Afghanistan Chamber of Commerce approached our authorities, and we have now made 24/7 arrangements for the import of fruits from Afghanistan, because they are perishable and they should not, both at Torkham and...
Okay, so Haroon Sharif Saab will summarize it for you because he understands these concepts much better.
Well, thank you very much. I will try and repeat some of the things and add a couple of points.
Yeah.
What Sartaj Saab basically illustrated that for the past 70 years, transit facility has been extended by Pakistan. The reception on APTA particularly has been mixed. That's the message. But Pakistan has tried, after the 2014 visit of President Ghani, several steps which were agreed. So Sartaj Saab basically elaborated a couple of steps like improved physical infrastructure at the border, a number of things to cut down the documentation and facilitation. And then he said basically the key factor is that the last meeting of two countries on this subject took place in 2016 February.
Yes.
The meetings need to be more frequent, or जो अभी previously scheduled meeting in Kabul could not take place because Afghanistan did not agree to that.
So there is a lack of interest, let's say, in having these from the Afghan side, and we are wondering why is that so?
So, Ms. Raz, do you think there is a lack of interest from the Afghan side, or you see many obstacles from the Pakistani side for not implementing the APTA?
First of all, thank you for raising this very important topic, the APTA agreement between the two countries. In terms of interest, let me emphasize that I think that's a misjudgment in a sense, saying that there is least or less interest from the Afghan government side or from the Afghan side to proceed in a greater discussion or further discussion in regards to APTA or really addressing the challenges. We do have the record in the minutes of the meeting with from the APTA meeting, which is the technical group meets on a regular basis in regards to APTA to really identify the technical issues between the two sides and address those challenges. So the track record usually has shown up that the major challenges that the Afghan traders have faced in terms of their trade and transit to Pakistan and vice versa, bringing in goods from Pakistan, those challenges were not addressed. In a sense, and they're
What were these challenges? Can you illustrate on that?
Sure. I can bring it up. For instance, one of the biggest challenge that they constantly refer is the unpredictability of the goods when our import goods going into Pakistan or vice versa, the goods coming into Afghanistan, the unpredictability of the documentation that happens. In a sense that APTA is not very clearly and very genuinely implemented. The hidden costs, the costs of the transit, for instance, there is a very two types of cost being given to Afghan traders versus Pakistani traders. So our traders, when they try to import goods from Pakistan, it gets really expensive for them to bring in, and the same thing with Afghanistan as well. And also there's another very great example in terms of the transit, when the goods are coming to Afghanistan without any APTA getting creating a clarity or even making a reference, in a sense that the specific goods should not be exported, but there are goods like cotton. Our Afghan traders are not allowed to bring it in from third country through a transit through Pakistan to Afghanistan. So these are some of the examples that I made a reference. So the clarity is that there is a great interest from our side that we want to address. But what is really the big challenge is that usually those constraints have not been addressed, and in the APTA meeting they are referenced, they have been brought up, but they are not really taken care pretty seriously from the Pakistan side.
Thank you. So, Muniza, you can see that the representative of our government here, Ms. Roz, is saying that there is a great interest from Afghan side for implementation of APTA and doing trade and transit with Pakistan. But we have here Mr. Ahadi, who was a high-profile official from Afghanistan side to sign the APTA. Mr. Ahadi, we know that APTA is a very detailed and a very long document between Afghanistan and Pakistan. What are the challenges in implementation of APTA from Afghanistan side?
Thank you. There are a number of problems, not so much with the agreement at APTA, but with the implementation of APTA. One, the Afghan side complains that our goods, transit goods, they get delayed for too long in Karachi, and sometimes then we have to pay fines for that. Second, the cost of transportation from Karachi to Peshawar and to Torkham is very high because the companies that can transport our goods, that's either initially it used to be a monopoly, NLC, and later on it became more of an oligopoly. Just a few companies, they can do this and they charge a very high price. So that's the number two issue. Third, according to APTA, Afghan truckers are supposed to go, or they can go, they have the right to go to Karachi and bring Afghan goods, transit goods. They have never been allowed to do that. And fourth, and quite important, is also the Wagah port issue. According to APTA, Afghanistan has the right to export goods to India and bring goods from India transit via Wagah. But it has never been implemented. It was implemented, but not in a very sincere way. In a very sincere way, and plus, there is something in APTA that I think is quite problematic and that should be revised, which is that Afghan importers, they almost have to deposit the amount that of the custom duties that Pakistan impose and then be reimbursed for that, which is extremely expensive. We thought we tried to have a number of solutions for this, and we reached agreement, but we would reach agreement with the technocrats here, but later on still the implementation would not happen. So, you know, these are basically quite a few of the problems here. And on transport, not only that they are not allowing our trucks to go there, but actually Pakistani trucks, they can go anywhere in Afghanistan, while Pakistan has not reciprocated that. So the major problem is that what the Afghan side is asking for is reciprocity, and that is what's lacking from the Pakistani side.
Mr. Hadi, so let's hear from the Pakistani side. What are, Muniza, we want to know from your guests, what are the obstacles and challenges that prevent APTA to be implemented fully?
All right, so let's continue that thought. Your guest brought up some very important points. Now, is it true that it's not really reciprocated on the Pakistan side, that our trucks can travel anywhere in Afghanistan, but the Afghan trucks cannot go to Karachi, cannot go to Lahore, cannot go to India via Lahore?
I will try and take a neutral stance because I have looked at both countries from the World Bank lens and the international lens. My understanding is, as Mr. Ahadi mentioned, that there are a limited number of companies, both Pakistan and Afghanistan, who are allowed to go to the port. He is also right, basically, that Afghan trucks go all the way to the Wagah border. Then they are not allowed to take goods or go to Atari,
right.
And they are not allowed to take Indian goods back, where they can take, Pakistani goods back to Afghanistan. In terms of implementation, I have seen independent surveys of both sides of traders. Actually, they are not too unhappy with APTA. The main issue at the moment is that the business community and private sector, they need very clear political signals.
From where?
From both governments at the highest level, that trade and economic cooperation is a bilateral priority. I think that signal is not through speeches or Twitters or press releases.
So what can the government do?
I am specifically coming to that, how other countries have done it. First of all, it is a fundamental decision that the bilateral relations between the two countries over the past 2 decades have been defined or looked into with the security lens, as all of us know.
That's correct.
Now the transition towards an economic lens need to show some demonstration. Now
but
for
Hafiz
that,
Saab, they are saying that APTA has not even been implemented at all. But Sartaj Aziz Saab, as we all heard, said something very different.
All I'm trying to say is that independent surveys are saying that results are mixed. Because when you hear two bilateral countries, obviously both will speak of their problems.
Right.
But independently, almost 50% of the people who are the beneficiaries of APTA, they are actually satisfied with it. But it can be improved a lot more on the issues which are, just elaborated.
So coming to the government, what should the government immediately do? Signaling, you are saying?
I think like ASEAN, China, Taiwan, and Indonesia, what they have done is that they have actually delegated a lot of work to private sector in terms of management. So that's number one. Number two is that there should be a very clear understanding at the highest level that how to insulate or separate economic cooperation from politics. This is a very tough one. But
this is a tough one.
But this has actually happened in the world. How? I give you an example. For instance, we have this famous, TAPI, the oil pipeline.
Yes.
Now, for that, all 4 countries have formed a company, which is run by a CEO, and the foreign offices and the other parties don't come into that dialogue. China does these things time and again, in their energy side. Now, on transit, the last point I would like to highlight here is that when we speak of trade, many people actually forget, because transit trade is a separate thing. Afghanistan has a wonderful opportunity to actually lead on the power or electricity trade. In the transit trade, the independent studies tell us that Afghanistan, the money you make around 5% of the volume,
Right.
it's for $260 million
Right.
a year.
Yeah.
But on electricity trade, the potential is almost double.
So
And
what's
it's
your
a
last
lot
point
easier.
then?
So my last point is that trade need to be seen in a much wider context. Not only few goods and services, one needs to be innovative, use more private sector, and then
Okay,
confidence
so you
will
make
start
a
building.
very important point. I don't know whether we can separate politics from economics, Sartaj Aziz Saab. You've been foreign minister, you've looked at economy also. I don't know whether that can happen. But what Haroon Saab over here is saying, at least give a good signal to the private sector and involve the private sector more. Now, why has the government of Pakistan not really encouraged the private sector, especially your government, which has really encouraged the private sector, especially in business and trade, otherwise?
You see, first of all, let me add that our transit trade facilities have improved enormously in the last few years, and there are always lingering problems. So if the transit trade authority were to meet regularly, these problems will be addressed. But if Afghanistan doesn't want to hold a meeting, then how can we address those problems? I invite them at 3 weeks' notice or 4 weeks' notice. We are ready to convene the authority in Kabul or Islamabad. Let them give me a date and we will convene the meeting so that the remaining problems are addressed on a regular basis. That is point number one. Secondly,
that's an important invitation from the former Foreign Minister, Mr. Sartaj Aziz Saab, Deputy Head of the Planning Commission here. Sami, I would like to go right across to your Deputy Foreign Minister there. He's saying, please give us a date. We'll have a meeting. Let's take this forward. Mr. Dela Raz, what do you have to say?
I think we came to the point that Mr. Mehdi mentioned it earlier, and I also pointed out, I think there is an issue of trust deficit. And the Afghan government, we are also dealing and working with our public. And the Afghan government side, we have extended our hand and proceeding and coming forward to hold many and various meetings. What really was discouraging that the outcomes of those meetings were not really visible and not tangible. What is really important, I believe, is that meeting together and really discussing the issues is absolutely fine. We can proceed with that. But what is really difficult is a guarantee of the outcome of that meeting, that those challenges, when it's brought up in the meeting, they would be fully addressed and they would be absolutely realized in a sense, and proper solutions will be developed for. And we do have right now certain mechanisms that works around building those trust that doesn't exist right now between the Afghan traders and Pakistani traders, and between the two private sector public. So I believe having another meeting will be okay and fine.
Okay.
But
before you go on,
yes.
Mr. Dela Raz, before you go on, Haroon Saab here has a question for you. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted a little clarification. It's really heartening to see that, Afghanistan side is welcoming a meeting. Please kindly, could you just let me know that my information is that there is a school of thought in Afghanistan side which thinks that APTA has actually expired. And there's no need to actually continue dialogue under that.
In fact, your President Ashraf Ghani has given a statement regarding
if that is the case, then one needs to, whereas on the Pakistani side, when I see the analysis, it actually says that after 5 years under clause 3 of APTA, it was automatically renewed for 5 more years. But as Sartaj Saab has mentioned, I think the solution is a very continuous dialogue, almost for 1.5 years or more, it hasn't happened. So could you kindly clarify that what is the view on APTA in Afghanistan?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure. I think the view from the Afghan government side is that there is time for once again to talk about APTA and renegotiate APTA, or any trade agreement that we can call it APTA or any different name that we can give it. But what is really clear that the agreement that was there is called as APTA, and as Mr. Ahadi also mentioned it, the agreement itself was good, but what was really complicated was in terms of its implementation. So what really needs to happen, two things. First, we have to really work up and make sure that those confidence building measures, certain few we have, we need to work on those one and really boost the confidence and really create that belief within the government and within the public that
you were talking about, earlier you were talking about creating or having a kind of guarantee for implementation of the agreements, right? How you can, I mean, what kind of guarantees you're looking for? There is agreement signed by both sides. So what kind of agreement, what kind of guarantee you're looking for?
I think the guarantees are very simple and straightforward. When commitments are made, those commitment needs to be delivered and taken care very seriously. So for APTA, we had the APTA group, technical group meeting that it was a very perfect, it was a good mechanism, and as Mr. Ahadi mentioned as well, that the agreement itself was pretty comprehensive. Yes, it has certain areas that had to be, that was unfair treatment towards the Afghan traders, but there were specific mechanisms, and those APTA mechanism itself was a good one, but usually the meetings within those mechanism, issues would be brought up for specific reasons, and the reasons were that they need to be implemented.
There's going to be a bilateral meeting between Afghanistan and Pakistan in January. So, Muniza, I just wanted to ask about a meeting which is going to take place in January in Afghanistan between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is going to address APTA and other trade and transit issues. So how important this meeting is going to be for both countries?
I think I don't want to speak too early in regards to that meeting. There is definitely an interest from the Afghan government side, based on seeing from the Pakistan side too, that we need to have a bilateral discussion on our trade bilateral relationship. That could be through APTA, or it could be through another mechanism or another agreement that both sides needs to agree on. Tentative date could be any time soon in January or even beyond. But what is extremely clear, and that's why I don't want to speak before that, because I think once we are going to that meeting, whenever it needs to take place, it's really important from our side that we have to speak with our trader and would be able to tell them that this meeting will bring the results they look
I want to ask a question from Mr. Ahadi.
Okay,
we hear Muniza.
Sami, just one short interjection here. We are on to something really important. Let me get a quick reaction from Mr. Sir, because your guest there has made a very important point, that how can we ensure that APTA can be implemented, and that she said one of the conditions is that please ensure that it will be implemented, and that's when the meeting can take place. Sartaj Aziz Saab, how can we ensure that?
You see, APTA authority has had 6 meetings so far, and each of those meetings had made progress. Their complaints are addressed, our concerns are addressed, and the progress made. Every time things have improved. So if you don't meet at least once a year with technical groups meeting in between, these issues will remain. So I think we should not try to link it to trust restoration, etc. Those are more complex issues that they will take their own time. But as far as transit trade is concerned, the APTA authority should meet. If they want to have a new agreement, that can be discussed. If they want to revise the existing agreement, that can be discussed. If there are implementation problems, that can be. That's the only way to address these problems. Because on certain issues, like recently, we impose import regulatory duties on large number of imports all over the world. And Afghanistan thought they are only being imposed on Afghanistan. So all our trucks were banned from entering Afghanistan. So these kind of issues can be addressed if we meet regularly to show that it was not meant against Afghanistan. So I think this is, as far as this is concerned, there is no shortcut to it. The APTA must meet at least once a year, and the earlier it meets, the better, and the technical group can also meet. The only other point which Harun Sharif made about politics, etc., as far as the transit trade through Wagah is concerned, our relation with India is a separate matter. We had a SAARC summit in which this item was coming up, but they postponed the summit. So any possibilities that we had for addressing this issue was scuttled by India. So I think as far as Afghan goods are concerned, we are allowing them freely to go to India, and also on return the trucks can take Pakistani goods. So, but we cannot, so as far as trade and other things between Afghanistan and Pakistan is concerned, we are ready to overlook the political differences and lack of trust, so that because these are important for Afghanistan. But as far as Indian goods are concerned, it depends on our relations with India and not just Afghanistan.
All right, so
Muniza.
there it is. He says that APTA should meet at least once a year and not link it to building trust. And secondly, Indian goods are not acceptable because we have right now tensions.
Well,
with India.
Muniza,
There it is.
what Mr. Sartaj Aziz just said is against APTA, against something the Pakistani side and the Afghan side have signed, right? In the very beginning of APTA agreement, it says there should be no discrimination against the goods and the transit and based on the origin of, which, for example, from which country it comes from. The second thing was, which I wanted to ask Mr. Sartaj Aziz, is your guest there said that we should isolate commerce from politics, right? But when Mr. Sartaj Aziz was the advisor, the senior advisor to the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, the border and crossing points between Afghanistan and Pakistan got closed several times. So why Mr. Sartaj Aziz and his government couldn't stop the politics in interfering to commerce?
Important questions, Sartaj Aziz, your answer.
Let me answer them.
Yes,
First of all,
course.
the transit trade between India and Afghanistan is allowed via Karachi. I mean, but we cannot allow the land route. That was never
No,
open
but it is
for
mentioned
Indian
in
goods for the last
APTA
70
that
years.
the
So,
transit should be allowed
the
through
transit trade
Wagah.
will not stop Indian goods coming to Afghanistan. No, there is no understanding that Indian goods can travel through Wagah.
Well,
We only
Mr.
allowed in
Ahadi is here,
2014
who
for the
is
first
a
time
signatory of
Afghan goods
APTA.
going by road to Wagah. No, it is, please reinterpret it. I'm absolutely 100% sure that Indian trade by land route was never allowed and will not be allowed. Indian goods are allowed to come through transit trade, normal transit trade via Karachi by sea.
So, Mr. Ahadi,
Secondly, the point about closing of the border, if it's not a question of politics. If attacks come from Afghanistan, killing 135 children in our schools, our universities, and obviously, if infiltration takes place, 40, 50,000 people, which brings in these terrorists also, we have to react and start imposing restrictions to check whether the undesirable people are coming. So these are issues which are taken up in other fora. But as far as transit trade is concerned, that can take place, that should be addressed in the transit trade house.
Okay, first things first, Sami, go ahead, and you have a guest there who was a signatory to APTA, so
Sure.
perhaps we can, ask
sure,
him.
yeah, sure, Mr. Ahadi, what's your response to that?
Thanks. Let me make this clarification. I think we are sometimes confusing two different issues. APTA is a transit agreement. It's not bilateral Pakistan-Afghanistan agreement, and we do have problems with our bilateral trade as well, but the problems with bilateral trades are different from the problems that we have with regards to transit trade. Let me also say that APTA is an agreement which is beneficial to both Afghanistan and Pakistan. Afghanistan needs a trade agreement. Okay, but now Pakistan also needs a trade agreement in order to export its goods to Central Asia. And I'll be honest. I think Karachi is a much more economical alternative, trade alternative for us than the other alternatives we have. If we seek other alternatives, it's not because they are more economical or we prefer them.
You're
it is
referring
because,
to Chabahar.
It is because that there are so many obstacles and such a level of unpredictability that we are forced to seek other alternatives. But from an economic point of view, for most Central Asian countries, and certainly for Afghanistan, Karachi and Port Qasim, these are the two more economical alternatives for us. So, I mean, although I'm not in the government, I'm sure that our government, even though on domestic issues I oppose the government, but on such issues, I'm sure that the government has that sort of rationality that it will seek, and it has, this government, Dr. Ghani's government, has sought very good relations with Pakistan. And it's, you can have another meeting in January. We have had tens of these meetings in the past. it is the sincerity of these meetings. It is what Deputy Minister Raz referred to. It is the, okay, you deliver what you agree to. And on most of these problems, we have reached agreement, but they have not been implemented. As to the validity of APTA, it says after 5 years, if one party informs the other party that it doesn't want to continue, okay, but otherwise it renews itself sort of like automatically. And sometimes there are angry statements from both sides. There are angry statements from the Afghan side that I don't think is in the best interest of Afghanistan, and there are angry statements from Pakistani side, and I think it is the problem is that our trade relations are very much affected by our political concerns, and I think it goes both ways, but largely I think unfortunately it's from the Pakistan side that it is affecting us.
I think
I want to add one more point.
Go ahead.
That you see, Afghanistan and Pakistan economic relation, bilateral as well as trade, it has really a comparative advantage. It is really economical for Afghanistan to have trade, bilateral as well as trade, compared to anyone else. And that's mostly because of geography, because of the lower cost of transportation. And it's unfortunate that our political disagreements is preventing a more rational approach to our economic policy and
thank you, Mr. Hadi. I think Muniza wants to ask some
Thank
question.
you so much, and our panelists here are eager to respond to you. Mr. Haroon, you are eager to respond, but really, is politics holding us back? And especially, I'd like to ask you another question. What about smuggling?
Well, there are two.
Can I add one point?
Ji Sartaj Sahab, please go ahead.
First of all, you see, I think despite political differences, our economic and trade problems can be resolved if we have regular interaction. First, there is a transit trade authority, then there is a joint economic commission. And we have been requesting a meeting of the joint, which is at the level of foreign finance ministers, and Afghanistan has issues. So without dialogue, there are always issues because we have concerns and there are practical problems unless they meet and discuss. So I hope that these dialogue, both at the Transit Trade Authority and the Joint Economic Commission, will resume so that these concerns, both on the Afghanistan and Pakistan side, can be addressed.
But Sartaj Sahab, allow me to ask you a question. That is correct that when you were advisor to Prime Minister on Foreign Affairs, we did close down the border, and not only the Afghans, but people from our side also suffered. There were divided families. There were ambulances that couldn't go across. My question to you is, how did that really reduce terrorism? Because terrorists don't really get a visa and come to Pakistan or Afghanistan. So how did that resolve the problems of infiltration?
That was a reaction to their inability to control people who attack us.
But sir, they don't get visas and they
But
don't come
get
through
visas,
checkpoints.
but they don't act against them.
They don't cross the crossing points.
Now a few attacks have taken place. If constantly attacks comes from Afghanistan side and they kill our universities and children and others, our agencies have to show some...
Sir, but my point, by clamping down on visas and closing the border, you're not really addressing that problem, because the terrorists are certainly not coming into Pakistan through visas, and neither were terrorists going into India through visas. I mean, they have other means.
No, terrorists are not coming,
why is the governments of these three countries are holding the population back from economic prosperity just because they can't see beyond borders, and the terrorists, for them, these borders don't exist?
No, the answer is border management, which we are not doing. But as far as the authorities are concerned, they were not acting against people who were attacking us. They were actually facilitating them.
Muniza, I think
right,
Deputy
so
Minister
that's
Abdullah Raz wants to have a response, a quick response to what Mr. Sartaj Aziz said.
Just
a few
one
seconds.
short response from Mr. Haroon, who's been waiting for a very long time, Sami. Just one short response,
sure,
then I'll
ahead.
come to you. Yes.
No, I think just 2 to 3 very short points on this particular issue. The empirical evidence actually shows that, overall, the trade between Pakistan and Afghanistan and the regional trade is showing positive signals with big hiccups, which we are talking. In terms of border management and other issues, both countries need to look at that how to strengthen the fragmented technical structures. For instance, Ministry of Commerce in Pakistan perhaps does not have more than 20-25% role in terms of border management. It is security, it is FBR, it is customs, it is quality controls. similar things actually happen on the other side as well. So I think the countries who have successfully done it, they have integrated the trade mechanisms. And I think Pakistan was at the final stages of setting up a land port authority for that purpose, which can actually integrate these issues. What we are discussing, what I'm hearing from both countries, these issues are not that big. They are actually working level issues.
But is there a will?
The question is more than a question is, and on border management, like European countries and others, the security question, technology has addressed it wonderfully. So one needs to address now in GPS and others you do that.
And a very good suggestion, but before that's a solution.
This is one of the solutions,
that's a solution,
but for that you need to meet up and sit together.
But the accusation is there, Sami, as the former foreign minister made, that actually terrorists are helped by the government there in infiltrating towards Pakistan and, you know, carrying out terror activities here. Over to
you. But you know that the same kind of accusations, and even I can say more accusation from Afghanistan side, is on Pakistani government. And Mr. Sartaj Aziz himself has said that there are some elements of Taliban and others in Pakistan and supported by Pakistani government when he was the advisor for Prime Minister. Miss Adla Rose, please.
Yes, so a very quick response to Mr. Sartaj Aziz, and then the reference he made to some of the crossing points being closed for security purposes. I very clearly remember last year when the crossing point between Chaman and Spin Boldak, it was closed. It was not any security reason, it was purely political. If everybody remembers, I think it came up in the media too, it was the issue of flag burning. And it was very interestingly happened around the peak season of our grapes season. And I remember when that crossing point was closed, it was not any security reason, it was purely political, and our traders called because their trucks were waiting around Spin Boldak area, and they had no idea how to get in, and because those were perishable goods, and they really we faced and they faced a huge cost. And that really pushed the Afghan government to really come to an understanding and reality that we really have to start diversifying our trade opportunities in our ports and transit with other countries. And because of that specific incident, His Excellency the President started to have the discussion with India to have an alternative. And I think what is really important is, I'm coming back to everybody agrees in a sense that we have to separate politics from economic development.
But there is another
trade.
suggestion we hear from the inside Afghan government that we should include Tajikistan and India as well into the APTA agreement.
Absolutely.
So why is that important to include India and Tajikistan?
So let me answer that one. Because one of the huge problem right now we have is that when our traders go to the Wagah port and they take Afghan goods to drop it off, on the way coming back, they're not able to take Indian goods and through a land transfer coming into Afghanistan based on the restriction that comes in from the Pakistan government side. While Pakistani trucks, they can travel all the way to Central Asia, and to Central Asia, I'm going to name the countries that they can go. They can go to Turkmenistan, they can go to Uzbekistan.
I think President Ghani on October 23rd banned the trip of Pakistani trucks.
So, and that's under APTA. They were able to go to Tajikistan, and then they were able to go to Iran as well. And they were also able to bring the goods made in those countries and transfer it to Pakistan. So where we saw that there was very unfair treatment in a sense that our trucks would come empty, and then in order to really make the APTA agreement being more of a fair treatment to Afghan traders as well. So our proposal has been that a discussion with APTA and a discussion with a trade agreement with Pakistan, when we are adding specifically Tajikistan or Central Asia, it's really important to add India into that discussion as well.
Okay.
And that's the main reason.
Muniza, you see that our guest here in Kabul says that it's very important from the Afghan lens that to include India and Tajikistan into APTA. How your guests there in Pakistan view this issue?
All right. Harun Saab, there is a certain people are very reluctant to include India into the APTA agreement here in Pakistan. Why is that so?
I think countries can always go in circles, and this is one example. One is saying that there is a progress, then there is a movement backwards. But I would, as an economist who is looking at the world, I think the economic landscape of this region is going to be quite different in 5 years from now. It's not only Pakistan. It's not only It's not only Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. There will be other players looking at this region. There's a lot of capital looking at this region. Now, the test is that countries who have progressed, they have demonstrated that they can actually transact business safely, efficiently, and I would repeat, isolating or insulating it from the wider territorial or long-term issues. Now, we need to demonstrate this region, if we need to rise to the East Asian levels and others, that these 2-3 countries can work together. For that, Pakistan being the bigger market, Pakistan needs to show a leadership role, because Pakistan is in a position, they are opening up with China and others. This transit trade experience of Pakistan is going to be vital for Pakistan, because much larger volumes of trade is likely to pass through Pakistan in future. So one needs to have the capacity, the technology, for linkages with the region. Afghanistan also has an opportunity through Pakistan getting into Chinese markets in future.
Right.
So it is much wider than looking at this point in time.
Just looking at it through the prism of
So the signal
security.
needs to go to global investors that this region is ready for business in a secure and efficient manner.
Okay,
and for that you need to meet up.
That's a very important suggestion. Your government has always put business first, but in this case, it seems that India remains the sticking point. Why can't you go beyond that and perhaps look at the region as a whole, not just through the security lens?
Well, we are doing connectivity with the regional countries on a very big scale through CPEC and Central Asia and CAREC and others. But as far as India is concerned, the ball is India's court. Let them take some steps to at least we may not become friends, but we can have normal relations. And if that happens, then of course these things can get closer to solution.
And do you feel that India is, we know that they have a right-wing government there, and they've always been warmongering, much more warmongering than when we've ever seen in the past. What can India do differently, you think, to enable trade between Afghanistan, Pakistan and India?
Well, reconvene the SAARC summit. These items are all on the agenda, and because in a regional context, these things are easier. And 2 agreements on rail and road were on the agenda of the SAARC summit in November 2016. But India, without any reason, postponed it, citing security reason. Although 4 months later, we had the ECO summit in which 7 heads of state participated. So the excuse of security was totally wrong. So when they scuttle regional cooperation, then all these things become victims.
So that's an important point, Sami. Perhaps Afghanistan being now close to India, maybe you can campaign for closer ties with Pakistan, with better relations with Pakistan, so that we can allow connectivity between all the 3 countries. What Sartaj Sahab is saying is that we are not the only spoilers here, if that's how you see it. Certainly, India has not, extended any olive branch to Pakistan, or has been very hostile since the Modi government took over. That's a fair assessment of things, isn't it?
We will ask that question from Mr. Ahadi, but at the same time, I want to say that Afghanistan has been for trade and transit. We have allowed Pakistani trade and transit to go to all countries of Central Asia, for example, Tajikistan. So what the Afghan government is expecting from the Pakistani side is to do the same thing and allow our goods to go to India and the Indian goods to come to Afghanistan. Mr. Ahadi, we wanted to know your point of view on that.
Yes. Okay. First, on relations between India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Afghanistan would like to have friendly relations with both India and Pakistan. And you see, Pakistan allows Indian goods to come to Pakistan through Wagah. Why doesn't it allow goods from India to come to Afghanistan through Wagah? It's not like Wagah is close to Indian goods, period. So that's one thing. Second, I would say that actually trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan actually is declining. I think the transit trade used to be, earlier you said solely through Pakistan. It's not a few years ago, it wasn't solely, but it was like 70–80%. Now I think Bandar Abbas is becoming a major alternative, and probably, I don't know the percentage, but probably we import as much from Bandar Abbas. Actually, Chabahar hasn't started yet. And as I said earlier, you know, if you, without political interference, I think our preference will be for Pakistan and Karachi because it's economical for us. So that trade is going down, and I think it will be hurting Pakistan the same way that it's hurting Afghanistan. Our bilateral trade is also going down. We used to have a few years ago, it used to be $2.4 billion. Now it's $1.4 billion. And I'm sure that Pakistani exports to Afghanistan has declined substantially. So I do think that you need to address this issue, not just from the Afghan national interest point of view, but also from Pakistani national interest point of view. And I would say on bilateral trade, you know, you increased the tariff on Afghan fruits just when we were harvesting our fruits just some 2–3 months ago. And it's really hurtful. And what happens is that initially politics affects our trade, but then trade pains also affects our politics, and it becomes a very vicious cycle in this regard. And I think it should be taken very seriously. In the long run, I think this trade substitution is taking place. And that trade substitution is not good for Afghanistan, is not good for Pakistan, because our mutual comparative advantage is for us to trade with each other and for our transit trade to take place through Pakistan and not through so much from other
Mr.
countries.
Hadi, you mentioned some figures. Let me give you some figures about the decline of transit and trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Since 2015, the trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan has declined by 28.6%. Transit trade has also fallen by 23% since 2010. And at the same time, Pakistan's exports to Afghanistan have declined by 36% since the fiscal year of 2010 to 2011. Muniza, I think we have got just 3 or 4 minutes to conclude the discussion. Please go ahead and have your final questions.
We have barely 2 minutes, Sami. So Sami, we always try and find solutions on this show. Let's try and find a solution from this show. Let's begin with Mr. Sartaj Aziz Saab. Look, at the moment it seems that there is a deadlock. Afghanistan says that there is a trust deficit. We say that Afghanistan is not talking to us. Sir, is there another way that we can take this forward and increase trade between the two countries?
Well, I think we have been, of course, also trying to build our trust with Afghanistan as much as possible, and saying that, you know, blaming Pakistan for everything that goes wrong in Afghanistan is not the right policy. But as far as trade is concerned, we are quite ready to isolate this from these political issues and have the meeting of the Transit Authority very regularly, and also the Joint Economic Commission can deal with the overall issues of duties and bigger issues. So I think these two bodies should meet as early as possible. So many of these issues that have been raised today could easily be addressed at the policy level if they were to be brought and explanations given and facts clarified. So I hope this interaction can be resumed, because not talking is no solution to anything.
Absolutely. Harun Saab, I'd like to ask you that India has always been a contentious issue. Now, till India doesn't soften up to Pakistan, it seems that trade will also be held hostage. So how can Pakistan move forward with India having the attitude that it does?
Well, that's where I mentioned the leadership role, that, you know, you need to be flexible on some positions at some point in time.
Who needs to be flexible?
Any of the 3 countries. As I said,
but
Pakistan,
what should Pakistan do now with India not being flexible?
Pakistan is a much bigger country, and at one point in time I can share, there was a discussion on a pilot project where some of the Afghan trucks, at the moment 2,500 Afghan trucks go to Wagah border a month. Okay, so it was a suggestion made at the highest level, and that, you know, let's say 100 trucks can actually go to Atari, and you put up the, you know, security mechanism and see how it goes. And I understand that that has been discussed. You need to go gradual. In terms of political volatility, looking at the globe, if one is waiting for stability, you are actually a loser. You need to take a decision right now. That's how, these emerging economies attract capital. That's my final
So,
message.
Aziz Saab, one last question. Who really stops you from taking these decisions? I know that your government wanted good relations with Afghanistan and India. What's really stopping you, sir?
Well, I think in this case, India adopted a totally unreasonable position and tried to isolate Pakistan. And of course, they didn't succeed because we have much better links with China and Central Asia. But I think this whole effort of accepting hegemony, because every other country in South Asia had become quote-unquote subservient or sort of accepted their hegemony, and Pakistan could not without compromising its basic principles. So India wants to have peace and normalization with Pakistan on its own terms, which is a hegemonistic relationship, which we cannot accept. So I think ultimately we'll have to weather out Mr. Modi's government and protect our vital interests as best as we can, but I don't see any normalization while Mr. Modi is in power.
All right. So, Sami, there it is. Mr. Sartaj is saying that he doesn't see any normalization with the Modi government in power, but he also insists that in order for us to move forward, and he's also said that it's not off the table that Afghan trucks can go from Wagah to Atari, but for that to happen, there need to be talks, and for talks, we need to talk again. So, why are you holding the talks back? Why are you holding the discussions back? I'll need a response, and then we'll have to go towards
Muniza, we hear that Mr. Sartaj Aziz is talking about the talks, but at the same time he is saying he doesn't see any sign of normalization in the relation with India, and as that happens with India, and as that happens, the trade and transit between Afghanistan and Pakistan is going to remain the same. So what are your final thoughts, Ms. Raz?
Sure.
First, I think I just wanted to respond to Mr. Sartaj Aziz that from the government side, I think we are not against talks. We're absolutely for talks, and especially talks that brings, and the results would be to have a greater and expanded economic ties and cooperation, which will benefit our public and your public as well. But what is really important, if we have an assurance that those talks will lead to results, and if it doesn't, then I believe it will be talks and talks again. In terms of, I absolutely agree with Mr. Sharif as well, and I'm with him on that school of thought, in a sense that we absolutely need to separate politics from economic cooperation.
But does your government separate politics from economic cooperation?
We do. We do. We have done it. In a sense, why I'm going to bring that one? Because if we look at this government, I think this government has been extremely progressive in proceeding, trying to take very proactive role in a sense of expanding its trade and as well as transit and bilateral economic cooperation with Central Asia. I think it's a great example. We have started to do it with India, and we have started to do it with Iran, and we're looking forward to expand it to Europe and as well to China as well. And we're absolutely willing to do so the same thing with Pakistan. But what is really important is that for the government thinks, and then the economic side of the government thinks very competitively and comparatively, in a sense that whatever is beneficial. So my plea would be that, and my plea is to Pakistani public as well, that we have to utilize the existing opportunity that exists right now within this government, that we have to proceed and expand our economic ties. But with that, we need Pakistani government's clear assurance that what is really made as a commitment, and those commitments on economic side should be delivered. So as an independent government, the Afghan government has the freedom and the leverage and the openness to expand and diversify its trade relationship. So if we have Pakistan, that's good. If not, I think we see the example today that our trade balance has changed.
Thank you, Ms. Rose.
And if I may just, in our the Pakistani export has declined, and now our biggest importer is, or the import we bring in is from Iran, and it will even expand to other countries too.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Hadi, what are your final thoughts?
3 points. One, I think our economic relations can be a win-win situation for both sides, and I don't think we should use economic relations to improve our, to get our way with political solutions. I think resolution of political issues might take a much longer period, but I don't see any logical reason as to why we cannot go on with having good economic relations. And in the long run, maybe having good economic relations will also improve our political relations too. There is a well-known theory in international relations that supports that.
Thank you so much. Munizat, that's all from Afghanistan. If there is any final thought from your guest in Islamabad, we are ready to hear it.
Well, thank you very much, Sami. That's all from Islamabad here, and thank you so much for joining us from Afghanistan. So let's conclude this program. I think I speak for my colleague Sami Mahdi in Kabul. I hope that politicians rise beyond and above politics so that their populations which are below the poverty level can also rise beyond and above the poverty level, and there can be trade and economy between the two countries. Till then, I think we'll be hostage to very bad politics. On that note, good night and thank you for watching.
Also, thank you for watching from Kabul, and I want to say that, yeah, we cannot wait for stability. If we wait for stability, we will lose. We should create stability, and commerce and trade is in the benefit and the mutual benefits of both countries. Thank you so much.